What does it mean to go in the infinite now? It's an absolute blissful state. Total bliss. And the only way for your mind to handle that total bliss is to let go of the self. So you're basically returned to your mother's womb. Freud was also a neurotic and a Jewish neurotic too. And Freud kind of hated this and said the oceanic feeling. He was skeptical about it. And he was onto something, because the oceanic feeling is also what drug abusers and what addicts want as well. So they want to go to that experience.
But it's a narrowing version of it, which leads to nowhere.
And of course, they kill it when they try to, because if you try to get in that blissful state, anybody's going there knows. If you try to get that blissful state to stay in it, then you ruin it. The only way to experience is through spiritual guidance, to go all the way to the infinite now. And once you're in that bliss, in that total bliss, you know that I cannot stay here because I cannot get myself back. So I have to return to everyday reality. I have to climb down from the heaven I'm located in. And by climbing down from the heaven, I remind myself that I can now memorize that experience. It's now part of my new self. I'm transformed. I'm a new self. I'm transformed. So I come down. And because I have the skill to come down, I'm allowed to return.
Hi everyone, my name is Balázs Kégl and this is the I Scientist podcast, where we explore artificial intelligence, the body and the soul. And this is my immense pleasure to host Alexander Bard the fourth time. It's becoming a habit.
I'm addicted too, Balázs. I'm addicted. I'm so glad to be here, and I've been really looking forward to this conversation.
Yes, me too. Actually, this is going to be something very unique, I think, because the first three we were talking about your book, Process and Event, which was something that already existed as a book. It was something that, of course, it wasn't a presentation, it was a dialogue about it, but there was some text that existed already. And this time you decided to write another book on mysticism. So this is going to be the topic of the conversation, but this book is not yet written. So we are actually participating in the process of making philosophy.
I've got the notebook here already.
Yeah, notebook.
So
okay.
the reason I'm wearing the glasses today is that I can actually go between the conversation and the notebook, because we're actually actively doing philosophical research in this conversation, Balázs.
Yeah, and this is amazing. I mean, I'm following this on the IDW, the mailing list, which is also amazing because I see things moving. So it is chaotic, and this conversation, I think, is going to be chaotic too. It's not so sharp and clean as presenting something that exists already, but this is also what makes it so exciting. How to, make philosophy real time. So, as I said, the book is about mysticism, and this is, even if the book was...
it's not at all what people think when they hear the term mysticism.
No, that's exactly what we will start talking about.
We can start by saying that why would I, after I've done the Syntheism book and Digital Libido and Process and Event, after I've done this trilogy with Jan Söderqvist, which is basically a metaphysics on time. It's a metaphysics where Syntheism is a book about the future. Digital Libido about the very messy state we're in, which is going to get even messier. As we know now in Donald Trump's America, everything is going to get very, very messy when the paradigms collide. And then, of course, Process and Event, which actually, as the third book, rewrites all of history. And it sounds kind of counterintuitive. Why would you write a book about the future first, and then a book about now, and then a book about the past? Well, you do it in that order because it's easier. It's easier to say something about future and say something about the past, to be honest. But you also do it because the book on the past has to be written as if from the future. Mm-hmm. So you have to imagine that you are 100 years from now, and then you're trying to reinterpret the past to try to understand where you're located, because that's what human beings do all the time. What we do is that to get a location, we have to find out where we're located. We have to find out where we're going. because that's survival. But to know where we're going and why we're going in that direction, we have to figure out who we are and where we come from. So
Yes.
it's just the way Hegel does it, and Hegel does it so well that Jan Söderqvist and I, and we're totally Hegelian, we have no reason not to follow Hegel's advice and do those 3 books in that order. Then the question is, why the hell go into mysticism next? Well, it's because transcendence is the most complicated topic of philosophy. And it's the ultimate challenge. Because if the ultimate challenge of philosophy was always, how am I going to deal with a stranger? I don't have a problem dealing with my friends. I don't have a problem dealing with my family, brothers, sisters, mother, father, whatever. And even if there are conflicts within families and within clans and within tribes, it's nothing compared to the war, which is the standard relationship between communities. As soon as you leave the tribe, as soon as you leave the socials, this fundamental biologically developed form, this sort of Darwinian form that we live with, this size of 1,500 people with whom we feel affinity and loyalty. As soon as we leave that format, this has been the biggest challenge for philosophy for the last 4,000 years. How are we going to try to convince people not to go to war with each other? Because that's instantly what they want to do if they leave the social. How do we get around that? You and I have been talking about that both of us have shamanic personalities. So we belong to a small minority of people for whom it's natural to not see skin color, to not care about sexual orientation, to not even care about sex, to be honest about it, in the sense that we can talk to anybody. But that's a privilege that 4 to 5% of the population has. And they're usually wild and crazy and take risks on a par that nobody else does. So we need the other 95% of the population not to be like us. But we have to teach them from our experience what it means to be shamanic, in the sense that we have to convince them through some sort of narrative what it means to love love neighbors, a bit Christian, but to love the stranger.
Yes.
What if you're curious enough about the stranger to be able to love the stranger?
I also feel that we still have the classical shamanic role to accompany people through transformations, which are messier today because we don't live in the tribal society where all those transformations were written into 100,000 years of history, but those still exist, and I think there's a lot to do for even to the practice and the rituals of
You just brought up the word, and this is the word, first term I'm going to write down here, because it's the relation between transcendence and transformation. Other thing I'm obsessed with is that no matter how deep Jan Söderqvist and I've gone in our books, and we've gone beyond, I think, any thinking out there besides Hegel maybe, but to think a philosophy of time. And I think time means different things to different people, but it's still the biggest mystery of all. I mean, the most serious, the most honest physicists, like Roger Penrose, Lee Smolin, or the whole new generation coming now with Jacob Berendez and Jonathan Oppenheimer, all the great physicists, every one of them will today start by saying that time is the biggest mystery of all, and we have no clue what time is. When people talk about time, they talk about effects of time. They talk about the consequence of time. They talk about their own constraints due to time. They talk about their own birth and their own death, which, like Nietzsche says, people constantly refer to. It's like people are so obsessed with their own birth and their own death that that's reflected in everything they ever do. For philosophers too. So the problem is we don't have a proper philosophy of time. And we've been very sloppy when it comes to time. We just assume that it's an axiom that we have to accept and live with. And we've clumsily, due to Einstein, we've clumsily thrown time and space together as a category called space-time. As you know, because you're a physicist yourself, space-time was invented because it was a mathematical convenience. Okay, like an arranged marriage. It's arranged. The point is that it's convenient. The point is not that the man and the woman in the marriage love each other. It's just a matter of convenience. A mathematical convenience made us start using space-time, which is fantastic for measurements, and you can place anything in 4 categories, not just the 3-dimensional space, but a 4th dimensional time. The problem, though, is that time and space are totally different categories. They have nothing to do with each other. And any serious physicist today, the first thing they'll say is that that was a mistake. We have to start thinking time and space as separate categories. And this is why they are all saying space-time is not first category. Okay, space-time isn't first category. Space-time is a byproduct of something more primordial than space-time, which is pure time. Mm-hmm. Lee Smolin and Mamilla have defined it in their brilliant book, what's it called? The time book they wrote 12 years ago, whatever. The Return to Time or something like that. Anyway, Smolin and Mamilla called it pure time. We already called it hypertime in a paper that Jan Söderqvist and I published 11 years before that. So we're staying with the term hypertime. When physicists talk about pure time and we philosophers talk about hypertime, we mean the same thing. And just think of it as a thought experiment. Like when anybody says, well, what happened before the Big Bang? Exactly. To be able to say before the Big Bang, you have to assume hypertime. Just beginning of space-time is what we now call the Big Bang. So the great thing, oh, you lost my
video? I lost your video.
Okay.
Yeah, you're back.
Thank you. That's what you looked at. You just tell me that's happened. So it just shows that this recording is very human, doesn't it? And it's kinds of weird AI happening all the time on Zoom. But anyway, but you pointed out exactly why I wrote down the first note in my notebook in this conversation is that transcendence and transformation somehow are related to one another. Mm-hmm. So I think the key is that to understand transcendence, which basically Western philosophy completely skipped after it left Christianity, it's like they didn't want to deal with it. Nietzsche aspires towards it. Nietzsche uniquely aspires toward transcendence. Hegel understands that it's a force. Transcendence is something that drives us as human beings. Freud certainly thinks that way. He thinks it's something like whatever inside of you that wants to die for a bigger cause than yourself. If you want to die for your own children and you're a father, if you want to take the bullet for your own child, that's transcendence. But in all secular Western philosophy, this category has been disqualified because it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense for an empiricist. It doesn't make any sense for a rationalist. You have to go beyond rationalism. You have to go beyond the empiricism. You have to go towards the spiritual or the religious. I hate to say that, but that's where you have to go to understand why transcendence is such an important category for philosophy. And I want to go into transcendence, and I certainly think that in the kind of work we're digging into, and I'm glad for you to help me out with this and giving you credit for it, I'm glad to understand why are transformation and transcendence connected to one another. Because you would never hear a secular, science-oriented Westerner talk about transformation.
Yes, which is weird because it happens in every moment, actually. Never the same as the moment before.
You're supposed to just suddenly turn from boy to man or turn
exactly.
without effort, right? It's just going to happen. That's why it's so messy right now out there. We don't have any values around those sort of rites of passages and things that we need, because basically Western science has disqualified any of those categories. Say that no, transformations happen according to nature at certain stages, and we can't really do anything about it.
And that's usually stops at 18, right? Or 21. In the US, it's 21. Yeah, I had my high school reunion, 38th high school reunion on Friday, and there is nothing that shows better than transformation happens than when you see people who you haven't seen for 40 years and you don't even recognize them, right? It's not because you forgot them, but because the person you remember is not the same. And the reflection you get from them about yourself is very weird too, because they remember my 20-year-old self, which is behaving
as if you still were those same people, right?
So exactly.
School reunion, it's like the entire social map that you had when you were 18 is suddenly replicated instantly because people have no other map.
Yeah.
And you realize, oh, I was the guy who was bullied at school, but I'm the one who went off and became a billionaire. but they're still behaving as if I'm the guy they're going to bully.
Exactly. And
Listen,
that's,
I better tell them I became a billionaire, made it. I'm not bitter about them bullying me when I was 10, so they can stop everything. And the entire map falls apart and everybody's confused.
yes, yes, exactly. So I completely agree with you. Now I want to go back to mysticism, and I want to put an arc on this conversation. Maybe it will be multiple ones because we never finish the topics we want right in 1 hour. But you made a great point in one of your emails, is that a lot of philosophy happens ontology first, epistemology second, and maybe some phenomenology at the end, if ever. But a lot of philosophy starts with, the nature of reality, what reality is, as if the philosopher was not part of the reality, right? And you made the point that all philosophy should start with phenomenology, and I cannot agree with more with you on that.
Yeah.
Because it has to start with phenomenology, because this is what, where everything is grounded, what we actually experience. So I would like to start talking about mysticism from a phenomenological point of view. Like, what is mysticism? What is the mystic experience? What are the categories, or maybe the scale of it?
Let's just lay out first why these three categories are separate in the history.
Yes.
So what I discovered was precisely because we've been really sloppy with the philosophy of time, and there's still much work to do following Hegel and Nietzsche in their shared spirit. We have to start with realizing these three categories exist because they actually have their different points along the time axis. Mm-hmm. So here's the hypothesis. The hypothesis is that phenomenology is first. Epistemology follows from phenomenology, and ontology follows from epistemology, and it cannot be any other way. And we've gone through this before because in Process and Event, we lay out a dialectical triad called narratology. So when people say truth, they realize the different interpretations of what truth is, but they're fundamentally three different truths that are irreducible to one another. So there's pathos, there's mythos, and there's logos, if you follow them along the time axis. So pathos is like the instant emotion, the phenomenological experience, right? And then the mythos is in between. We can keep it there for now. And then what follows afterwards is the logos, is the summary of the world, which apparently is ontological. So we for example, these days people are obsessed with computers, right? They're so obsessed with computers, they want to put computers on absolutely everything where it doesn't belong. I'm currently reading Thomas Metzinger's new book, The Elephant and the Blind. And it's intensely interesting because Metzinger, as a cognitive scientist, has interviewed thousands of people about their most extreme experiences in their lives. But philosophically speaking, the book is absolute crap because Thomas Metzinger, as a cognitive scientist, wants to turn consciousness into something computation. That's a ridiculous idea. That is fundamentally never having done a philosophy of time. Metzinger has clearly skipped Hegel, he skipped Nietzsche, he skipped Freud, he skipped Heidegger, he's probably jumped from cognitive science to analytic philosophy, made a career out of being a rigorous German in America because rigorosity is something Americans never do, and suddenly he falls flat. Sorry, Thomas Metzinger, you're falling flat here. So ontology must be the third and last category. So, because we only ontologize the world in the past. After something has happened, we start ontologizing it. But the problem is that we're always stuck in between these two states, which is the mythical state, which is our subconscious state, and every present state we're located in is always subconscious. Consciousness is like a game the mind plays, so it can ontologize within its own subconsciousness. And a radical way of addressing this is to say that no decisions are ever made anywhere else but inside intuition. Every decision ever made is intuitive. So you see how we're going to go back to phenomenology and get phenomenology's proper role here? So what you get is that the subconscious state, where everything is located, where everything happens, where everything has existence, where my subjectivity exists, this present state that I'm located in can only make decisions that are intuitive. Because you can never make perfectly informed decisions because it's not a machine.
And it's immediate.
It has to be intuitive because we only survive by making intuitive decisions, because completely informed decisions are too slow for us to survive.
No, I mean, they are
That's why
not,
animals
even ontologically, they are
survive
not
machines.
decisions, right? The
Yeah.
actions we do is always subconscious in your terminology.
Yeah, exactly. So if you put an animal against the machine, any animal, the animal will beat the shit out of the machine because the animal can react intuitively and the machine cannot. So we just basically we unplug the machine and once it's unplugged, then basically it starts rusting.
No, I agree with you on what you want to say, but I think like machines do immediate decisions.
No,
it's just not based on their consciousness.
Those decisions are delayed.
Yes.
They are delayed. And we have to be very, very careful about the details.
Yes, I understand. Yes. So we are sort of part of the physical world in a certain very connected sense, and that it's
but let's drop physics and go back to
math.
So we can always discuss this later. But if you do that, that means that the current state I'm in, for me as a subject, is always epistemological. And this is what Nietzsche says: we are always living within a myth. And we're always slaves to our own psychology, and that's the beauty of living where we're located, and that's always the case. Existence itself is mythical. Foucault, the reverse Nietzsche, Foucault calls it episteme. He's absolutely right. To know the world is to be engaged with the world, and there's no knowledge that isn't engaged with the world, meaning that all work is body work. Everything is embodied, constantly embodied. So this is very Nietzsche. So once you understand that this is the case, this is the only state that has existence. That means from the point of view where you're located within the present state as a subject or as two subjects like you and I right now, we know that we're only stuck in the present state, which is the only thing that has existence. We have to start separating the past and the present and not give them the category of existence because they do not exist. So Graham Priest is brilliantly therefore put the category of absistence onto the future. Says the future exists, but it doesn't exist. And the past subsists, it has subsistence. It's still around there irritating us in the present state, in the existent state, but it has no existence of its own. That means that ontology is what we do in philosophy when we deal with subsistence. We reduce things to zeros and ones. Usually what we do history. We reduce it as much as we can to zeros and ones and then turn it into data. And that's exactly what data is, always how we deal with the past. And we can deal with the past all the way up until now, but not with now, because at now data implodes and data is no longer relevant. And then we go into the future, data is useless. Data can make predictions from past events on what's likely to happen in the future, but it cannot foresee the unforeseeable. It cannot, because we live in a seismological world where we cannot foresee things that are unforeseeable. But the unforeseeable is part of the future. It's called the indeterminate. It's in physics, it's in Hegel, it's in Nietzsche, it's everywhere. So now we can move on to phenomenology and say that phenomenology in itself has no existence. Phenomenology is exactly what absists to us. So it's like our first encounter with the world. Our first encounter with the world is phenomenological.
Yes.
But it must be phenomenal. If you really think phenomenology purely as pure phenomenology, it's prior to epistemology. It's like a very naive encounter that has no knowledge, has no learning, has no memory, has nothing with it to try to interpret the world. No interpretation has happened yet. It's just strictly phenomenological. And Nietzsche saw this clearly. And Nietzsche's critique of Kant is amazing. He skipped Hegel a bit too much. He was close to Hegel. He thought Hegel was too close to Kant. In reality, Hegel was much closer to Nietzsche. But Nietzsche's murder of Kant is precisely this murder. He says that I don't care about ontology. It's the easiest thing in the world. I do care about epistemology because I want to be an agent in the world and I want to create values and I want to do as much as I can with my agency. But he really cared about phenomenology. The irony is that the thinker who really thought phenomenology of the three was the one who never wrote a book with the title. Kant started doing phenomenology. Hegel did the phenomenology. The one who really did phenomenology, who wanted to think pure phenomenology, was Nietzsche. And the only other guys ever done it are the Zen masters of Japan. I've been looking for somebody who's doing phenomenology. I've been trying to look for somebody who does pure experience.
Yes, yes. I mean, but it's because it's so messy. It's hard to write about, right? It's writing itself is a non-phenomenological phenomenon, right?
Yeah, true. This is true. Metzinger says the same thing. But if we're going to critique Metzinger here, the problem is that it's not so much that they haven't written about pure experience, it's that people haven't thought
About it, yeah.
They haven't thought it properly.
I mean, it can be, yeah, it can be structured and looked at, and yeah.
This is why my last 6 months have been the return to Nietzsche. It's so ironic. I'm Nietzsche through other Nietzscheans. I'm trying to get at it's not only his wonderful pathos and his enormous passion for philosophical writing, but I really want to get to that point where Nietzsche is so tired of everybody being obsessed with ontology all the time. I always say, philosophy students ask about ontology and say, listen, ontology and the ontic, and the difference between the creation of ontology we human beings do, and the ontic world, the world that exists independently of us out there. Kant did it. It's done 1,000 times. It's meaningless to even talk about or deal with whatsoever. It's childish. It's high school philosophy. Ontology is so banal. Still people say, what does it mean that we said that something is? God, it's boring. And I love you for it because you get this balance. But let's go into that. So sorry if I took a lot of time. But let's go into phenomenology. Try to think it as purely as possible as pre-epistemology.
So yeah, before we go there, just a little parenthesis. So would you say that phenomenology is the only thing that matters for, let's say, animals? Like they don't do mythos, they don't do logos. They live in the present and they only do decisions in the present, right? They don't create their own history. Even their self is something that they live out in the present. It's not something created, yeah?
I disagree. They don't have language. They have everything else.
Yeah.
So what animals are doing, they do all three. They learn.
They learn, but we learn too, but it's sort of like a subconscious learning that we use in the present.
But remember, epistemology is subconscious. Epistemology is subconscious. The only thing is that animals have to use a totally different form of ontology. It's an interesting question. It's an interesting question. If you were doing zoo philosopher or something like that, so it would be a really interesting question. How do animals ontologize? Because we definitely ontologize through language, and we use mathematics on top of that. And mathematics is that other purely ontological language that we're using to be very exact. So we can allow language to be poetic and fluid and therefore very useful. That's why philosophers use language, where scientists use mathematics. And that's why philosophy and science are incompatible, because you cannot make language as strict as mathematics, which is exactly the point. So language then, compared to mathematics is logos, and therefore language is mythos. And when you go into pathos, there's nothing there. The pathical narrative is the porn movie. It's a snuff movie. It's the news feed. It's reality as it happens.
Live.
With no direction.
Yeah.
It's like fate directs itself. It's the future storming towards us without us being in control.
No dramatic arc.
See how phenomenological that is? That phenomenology as its own category must deal with how we crash into the world, and it's a world we cannot control.
Yes, and it's scary.
It's scary. You know what? Animals handle it better than we do.
Yeah.
Probably because they're less busy hanging around with epistemology and ontology.
Exactly.
Human beings tend to go towards ontology, especially men. Men get stuck at ontology. Women tend to stay with epistemology, bless them. But it's also men who are adventurous enough to try to go deeper into the phenomenology.
And the mystic. Okay, so let's go back.
Really laid it out. This is wonderful. I mean, this is the wonderful first half, or whatever.
Yeah. So let's go back to phenomenology of mysticism. So you do a lot of psychedelics. I do breathwork, movement. I actually coming back from a movement medicine weekend where, it's sort of like dancing myself unconscious sort of experience. It's not so black and white, and we can talk about it. It's not like I completely lose consciousness, but I'm moving towards a state where I move so much that my subjectivity sort of goes in the background and actually is looking at me dancing. So it's there somewhere, but it feels like I'm not controlling my body anymore. It's like my body parts are either doing their own stuff or it's given to some kind of other control outside of me. So this is my phenomenology of mysticism, but I know that you have a very nice categorization of the pure nothingness and the pure everythingness and how it interacts and what we have between. But let's do that.
What we discovered is this. It's also lacking in Thomas Metzinger's understanding. He's a German, he's neurotic, so he avoids the ecstasy. And anybody who avoids ecstasy is not doing spirituality, for God's sake. So we can just go to this fantastic tradition of Varayana, the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, which is the only one that never compromised on the fact that two extreme states. One extreme state that we talked about is pure phenomenology or pure experience, which is prior to any consideration of what's going on. So it's subjectless, because the subject is created by the mind to have a problem-solving function. So how do I deal with this that I just experienced? Well, there's the I, right? Which is beautiful, but the subjectivity comes after the experience, right? So it's a subjectless state, the pure experience subject, and you can meditate yourself all the way towards that state. And precisely what happens is that yourself is just suddenly gone. It's just like there's some kind of embodied experience going on, but it has no self. Okay, so it's dissolved. And therefore, there's no difference between it and the world, because subjectivity also is produced to separate ourselves from the outside world. So there's an inner world and an outer world. That's dissolved in the pure experience. So it's an esoteric experience, it's a pure experience, and once you get there, suddenly the self's gone. It might pop back in again, don't worry, it will pop out again. Once you realize that you're going into the pure experience, then your self will come back in again because somebody coughed in the room you were sitting meditating or whatever. And that's exactly what, the self just briefly touches it, and then you have a laugh at it because you know the self is gonna dissolve and go out again.
Yes, that's exactly what I wanted to say, that in this experiments, usually people sit or lie in a very silent setup. So it's almost like very artificially done so you can get into that state, because anything comes through the phenomenological filter wakes you up.
Yeah, and of course, a lot of people are lying about it and say they've reached it and the experts on the experience, whatever. So the problem for guys like Thomas Metzinger is that his book, having interviewed thousands of people in the pure experience, is that he could just as well have gone to Pentecostal Christian church and interviewed people speaking in tongues, and it would be just as scientific, meaning the book is rubbish. It's not even cognitive science. That's the problem. You can't do science of consciousness. Only an autistic German could think you ever could. There are quite a few of those, but you can't. So let's forget science can ever get close to these experiences. One of the things I'm adamant about is that transcendence and transformation, the two terms we're talking about for the book, with credit to Ballas Kegel, whenever you pop up here, whenever we go close to those topics, this has nothing to do with science. This is a philosophy that has disqualified science from even entering the room.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, science is logos. So it's,
This is not science, okay? So the other experience, the other extreme state is the infinite now. And I looked for it already when I did Synthesis, because Synthesis was a book that dealt with the psychedelic experience, because psychedelic experience has always existed, but suddenly it's entered the mainstream. It's come into culture, and especially in a Western culture, which is completely starved for spirituality, the psychedelic experiences open up a lot of people to the fact they're spiritual beings. Okay, so I love to do that, even if I know it's often a shortcut. So psychedelics is to be avoided. If there's a longer, better road, take the longer, better road. But if you sometimes need a shortcut to open yourself up to save time, psychedelics is the trick. Okay, what does it mean to go in the infinite now? It's an absolute blissful state. Total bliss. And the only way for your mind to handle that total bliss is to let go of the self. So you're basically returned to your mother's womb. Freud was also a neurotic, and a Jewish neurotic too. And Freud kind of hated this and said the oceanic feeling. He was skeptical about it. And he was onto something, because the oceanic feeling is also what drug abusers and what addicts want as well. So they want to go to that experience.
But it's a narrowing version of it, which leads to nowhere.
And of course, they kill it when they try to, because if you try to get in that blissful state, anybody that's gone there knows. If you try to get that blissful state to stay in it, then you ruin it. The only way to experience is through spiritual guidance, to go all the way to the infinite now. And once you're in that bliss, in that total bliss, you know that I cannot stay here, because I cannot get myself back. So I have to return to everyday reality. I have to climb down from the heaven I'm located in. And by climbing down from the heaven, I remind myself that I can now memorize that experience. It's now part of my new self. I'm transformed. I'm a new self.
Exactly.
I'm
Yeah.
transformed. So I come down. And because I have the skill to come down, I'm allowed to return.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Actually, what's
And
happened with me.
both these two experiences have no
Yeah.
self. So where the self dissolves are the two experiences. That means that you're located exactly in between the two. When you're like me right here on a Sunday evening, take a cup of coffee, talk to your best friend, have a conversation, and have a very strong sense of self. That means the subject is a dialectical function between these two extreme states.
Yes.
And
No,
you
I
can
understand.
purge in everyday reality, cup of coffee, and think about what are the things that I have to do today, that I have to do to patch myself on the back so my super ego is okay with me. And what do I love to do after that? I'm going to do the rest of the day. And that's a wonderful day in your life. And hopefully you're healthy and fine and you can have a great day. That's your subjectivity, your sense of self.
So what's happened with me actually is because it's very much related to transformation. I think we are looking for this kind of experiences because we want to transform.
And
Like
because you want to guide others through the transformation, because that's the point.
yes, yes, that's like the wise.
You're born to do this, Balas. You're born to
Yeah.
do this. You're
So
born to lead people through transformation.
I
But they
came back
go to
from
either of these two states to be transformed, and preferably they do both. So the Zen
yes.
masters go to pure experience, and the Sufis go for bliss. I'd say stay with the Varayana, go for both.
Yes, exactly. And I think in like culturally or somehow sociologically through the 60s, maybe I'm not, I don't know everything, but it seems to me that the meditation Zen nothingness direction came more naturally to, let's say, what you call the pillar saints.
Yeah, because
Because
it's
it's
sex.
less
It's sexless. It's
sexless, bodiless,
Yeah.
and and I think that that's also beyond people who don't do either of them and do philosophy. Those that only do the Zen type nothingness, it's also distortion of what's going on. And before going to epistemology and what we can learn these states, I think we have to explore both extremes, because as you say, they also return to the same thing at the end, like David Data explains it very well in his system, this Taoist system. So I think we have to explore the whole scale of these things.
Absolutely. David Data is so right because he's a Nietzschean. Nietzsche's embodiment. Nothing can be thought outside the embodied.
Yes. Yes.
Body and mind are one. Okay? So once you start thinking that way, we talked about this before in Process and Event, where Jan Söderqvist and I laid out what is the problem with patriarchy? What was the problem with civilization? We said the problem with civilization was that when written language came along 3,000 years ago, we got two types of new experts. We got a little king of the text, the pillar saint, the Gnostic, who hates everything beneath his throat, who hates the body. Nietzsche hates Gnostics with a vengeance. We hate the Gnostics with him, right? There's also, as a consequence of that, the other category, the boy pharaoh. The boy pharaoh hates everything above his throat. He hates anybody can think because he's basically stupid and rude and you know, very straightforward, very physical. So he's just dick and muscles and hates anybody can think at all. And he wants to kill and burn texts, right? So the problem with Western culture is that Western culture ended up with two extremes. There were two different interpretations of the afterlife, the big lie. And these two interpretations was the boy pharaoh version of, which is Islam, and the pillar saint version of that, which is Christianity, which is the critique against Christianity and Islam that I share with Nietzsche. Okay? So we have to go to Eastern spirituality because we got nowhere to start in Western spirituality. Because in Eastern spirituality, there never was this division. The whole idea in Eastern spirituality is that you keep the two distinctions of sutra and tantra, but keeping sutra and tantra, you don't allow either the pillar saint or the boy pharaoh from coming forward. Now, they've had their problems anyway. They have pillar saints like Confucius. And in a way, when we look at the Silk Road, it eventually ended up with the pillar saint corner, which is neurotic Japan. And that's why I would be adamant to say the peak experience without the infinite now is exactly the starting point of the pillar saint.
Say it again.
The peak experience, pure experience, the pure experience without the infinite now is pillar saint ideology.
Yes, exactly.
That was your point too. And the other version, the infinite now without the pure experience, which is basically your average street drug dealer, right? Nothing wrong with drug dealers, drug addicts, I should say. Your average street drug addict. But the boy pharaoh, high on his own big ego and all that, high in his muscles, who wants to kill and slaughter everything he gets close to because he hates his own mind, because he hates anybody can think. The boy pharaoh version of reality, the pathos without the logos, the other end, is, of course, the infinite now without the pure experience. So the problem here is, if we now start looking into spirituality the last 3,000 years, so we're going to go into phallic mysticism together, we have to teach both. We have to teach that one without the other, dead wrong. Don't even go there.
Yes. And you know what I was thinking about is that everybody goes through the peak experience in orgasm. And we always get back to sex.
Wait. Peak experience. So can we keep pure experience of the infinite now?
Yeah, sorry. The
orgasm,
infinite now. The infinite now, the everythingness.
Yeah, the orgasm is like an incredibly short, quick.
Exactly. That's my point.
Because you have the orgasm, at least if you're a man, you come, and if you come, it's gone. So if you can stop coming, which is of course the basics of tantric sex for men.
Yes.
You can stop coming. Well, you're an expert on it, obviously. If you can stop coming, then you can stay in the infinite now.
Yes, exactly. But the interesting or even like irony of this is that, of course, this infinite now is a state that most institutions don't like because it's very hard to control. Yet we cannot escape it because it's so related to reproduction, the basic function of being. We cannot. We don't exist if we don't reproduce, and somehow this whole thing was made such that the pure experience, the infinite now has to be there, even for like a fraction of a second.
What if this? Okay, so this is the first hypothesis for tonight. What if any given society and its power structure, think like Foucault here, like critically, there's a society, there's a power structure. What if every power structure is terrified of both? What if the power structure is terrified of the pure experience and terrified of the infinite? And like to keep us all locked up on Mondays with a cup of coffee and thinking there's nothing else?
Of course, I agree.
Okay, we know why society hates the infinite now. Because people who go into ecstatic bliss cannot be controlled. Okay, so it replaces the infinite now with a really bland alternative, which is called hedonism, which is basically consumerism. Okay, but this is really interesting. What if society as a whole is really terrified of the pure experience too? And to not have to deal with the pure experience and to not have to deal with the infinite now, society must lock them up, put them in a container somewhere, ban them. Preferably ban them all right, but if they can't ban them, at least lock them up somewhere and then regard them as not serious. So the only way to practice the pure experience and to practice the infinite now is to leave society and go to a mountain range and ice yourself at the top of a mountain and build a monastery where nobody has access to you because you have to escape society, otherwise they'll kill you.
I heard you saying that.
Why was there never a Tibetan empire? Why is Tibet a mountain?
No, I agree that to institutional practice it is the only way. But I think we have enough freedom today to, we can do, psychedelics, we can do breathwork. No, breathwork police is not coming for me when I'm doing it. So it's there's
They
something, so
certainly
it's
come for
more,
you.
it's a
They certainly
softer,
come for you if you do psychedelics, and
yeah.
if you're experienced, they regard you as a madman.
Yeah, no, I know. Now, I think the reason why it cannot be completely eliminated is because of the transformation part, because we cannot grow up basically without going through these experiences. And this is where the shamans came in. They accompanied people through this transformation. So the tribal societies, they all have the initiation rituals where we go out in the forest and dance for 4 days, or a lot of pain stuff and a lot of things that are completely forbidden today, but they were there so the boy can grow up to an adult. And somehow it's this drive is still there even
Yeah,
today's
but
society, but
it is the pagan. It's the pagan. So Islam and Christianity banned it. Islam and Christianity banned the extreme experiences. Why? Because if you never experience the pure experience, and if you never experience the infinite now, you're stuck with yourself constantly. And you cannot go into selfless state. And that's exactly how society wants you, because then they can tame you and domesticate you and turn you into whatever they want you to be. The perfect way to control a human being is to make them think they're stuck in a prison called the self. And if the self disappears, they die. So going into selfless states is the revolutionary act. It's the tantric act par excellence. And that's exactly what Western culture banned it. And anybody who walks into society and claims that I've seen the light because I've been to the pure experience, or I've seen the light because I've been to the infinite now, or preferably I've been to both, is really dangerous for society, because it means that I can walk in and out of myself. Okay, in and out of myself. And when I walk in and out of myself, I actually walk in and out of the sociant, the original tribe. The sociant is what I return to when I stop being a self. So what happens is that I'm embraced by, I fall into the sociant. I am the sociant. The sociant is me. I am a tool for the sociant. I'm not a tool for a larger society that wants to contain and control me. I am the sociant. So the sociant, this fundamental Darwinianly developed form, the tribe,
yeah.
is who I serve, because I'm born out of the tribe. I'll die in the arms of the tribe. I am only an expression of a certain archetype during the time I live, which is my present subconscious state. Before I was born is now ontology. Before I was born subsists. The remnants of the life that existed before I was born around me. But it's not me, and it's not in my world, right? It subsists. What will happen after I'm dead? What absists to me now during my own lifetime, what absists to me is that somebody else will take my role and be my archetype in the service of the sociant when I'm dead. Okay. This is the whole structure that nomadology biologically, evolutionarily shaped in us. Now, to then go to larger than sociant size, to go towards society, means the society has to tame and domesticate me. And suddenly the first thing they must have discovered as they started creating permanent settlements, and of course they had created a narrative that permanent settlements were superior to anything that existed before, even if that was not the case, because they were bigger and had larger populations. As soon as permanent settlements came into history, they had to start creating a new narrative that said that we were primitive before the permanent settlement came along. And when we were primitive, we went for extreme states that are now closed forever because they're called sin.
And madness.
The Garden of Eden must no
Yes.
longer go there, because the Garden of Eden was obviously a state where you could walk in between out of yourself.
So still on the phenomenology of mysticism is a question that
Well,
a lot of
phenomenology is where it gets scary for the society, because phenomenology is prior to self. Phenomenology is always, in Hegel and in Nietzsche, prior to subjectivity.
yeah.
Subjectivity is exactly what the body creates where the body is interacting with the world and something is interacting with the world. So the body and the world start interacting with each other. The body-world relationship is exactly what creates subjectivity.
Yeah. No, I agree. What I want to ask is
Phenomenology is the name of the pre-subjective state we're talking about. That means that pure experience and the infinite now are two different versions, two extreme versions of pure phenomenology.
Yes. No, I agree with this. My question is more even like something pragmatic, which is that especially those who only go in the Zen direction, right, the nothingness, often end up in a narrative or in something that they want is that it's an escape mechanism from this world. And then they create the dualist world where there is the other world which is purer, which is nicer, which is better there. And so the goal is not to lose the ego, but to take my ego from this world and bring it there and then stay there, right? The Gnostic version.
Wait a second. Just to point this out so we get this right. So in Rinzai Zen and in Soto Zen, the two traditional Zen schools, there is no Pure Land Buddhism. There's no Pure Land. There's no other state.
I know, but I'm talking about like the
Pure Land Buddhism. This is Pure Land Buddhism is the third major enemy I have. Pure Land Buddhism, my third enemy is Christianity, Islam, and it's Pure Land Buddhism. Because Pure Land Buddhism occurs after Manichaeism, most hated object ever. So when Manichaeism comes to the East and it gets very popular in China, what happens is in response to its popularity and all this talk about the afterlife, feudal warlords in China discover that if they manage to convince people that there's another world somewhere, so we got to milk all the energy you got out of you here, so we can milk it all out of you because we got to send you off to heaven when you die. They invent Pure Land Buddhism. So there is no dualism but Rinzai and Soto Zen have no dualism.
Yes, but still, I'm talking about like the modern manifestation of these practices. And what would you say to people who discover
we call Western Buddhism? We call Western.
Yes, the people who discover this nothingness state, and it's so good there that they sort of try to escape it and they become Gnostic. And it's something that we agree that this is sort of really bad for a lot of reasons.
It's a really perverted way of looking at it because at least, like you, I've experienced both extreme states. That's why we're sitting here today. There was nothing about pure experience that I wanted to escape there, but maybe it is for neurotics.
Of course. I mean, which is like the classical.
If you talk about the two states, extreme states on their own, which is what we don't want, then the peak experience, being a pillar saint experience in itself, is neurosis. And the infinite now, which is the boy pharaoh, which of course why there's a bloodbath always in the path. Is
psychosis.
So and of course we want to be perverted enough. This is perversion in a good sense in psychoanalysis. We want to be perverted enough to stand between the two, which means the subject is a perversion. The subject is it's dialectical and perverted. Isn't it wonderful that yourself is perverted and dialectical? But it's perverted in the sense that it refuses to be neither neurotic and psychotic, but playing them out against each other. So basically it's on a road. And it says there are two ditches, but I refuse to go into the ditches. And the ditch is neurosis and psychosis. And therefore, the people who are addicted to the pure experience and refuse the infinite now and go towards the Gnostic pillar saint mode are into their neurosis. They're addicted to the neurosis. But you could equally say that anybody goes the other direction and is pulled on to the boy pharaoh, the infinite now boy pharaoh, and refuses to deal with the pure experience. That's threatening to them. They want to go into this massive psychosis state, and they want to stay there. They're addicted to psychosis. You could say that the pillar saint is addicted to neurosis. The boy pharaoh is addicted to
so like drug addicts.
Stand in between and refuse to be the two.
Because I'm been thinking like who would I know such, because it's not a common experience to meet people like that, but maybe as you said like drug addicts, but which drug addicts, because drug is more a dopaminergic thing. It's not really going to the infinite now if you take cocaine.
Well, it is because this is our work on Mamilla. So this is the term
Yeah,
Mamilla.
yeah, it's the Mamilla, yeah.
It's called the abject in Julia Kristeva. She invented the concept, but we renamed it Mamilla to give it more flair of what it is. So the Mamilla is this missing your mother's tit. And if you sit down in psychoanalysis with alcoholics and drug addicts and deal with it, and they realize psychoanalysis doesn't care if they drink themselves to death. The great thing with psychoanalysis, they have no morality at all. Psychoanalysis is this cold wall you're going up against where you can't lie to yourself any longer. And the only reason an alcoholic wants to do psychoanalysis, they want to know who they're lying to. And then they realize they're not lying to themselves at all. They know they're alcoholics and they know they want the other drink. And they can walk out of the room, out of psychoanalysis, and have another drink without guilt. That's fine. But they know that they're just longing so much to get back to their mother's tit that they could also deal with the trauma of never having separated from the mother's tit, which is probably something that happened during their early years in life. So somewhere between 1 and 4 years of age, they just were too close to their mother and they never got away from that fucking tit. And because they never got away from it, they cannot transform into becoming adults. The transformation from boy to man, if you talk about men here, and we're doing men's work here now, and if you talk about men, it cannot happen if you haven't dropped the Mamilla first. So addiction has to go before you become an adult, because an adult has to be embodied. So even if the boy was only a pillar saint, or the boy was a boy pharaoh, we can never accept an adult man is not embodied, because you're not a grown-up unless you're completely embodied. So you have to deal with and drop the Mamilla. And the problem is that sucking your mother's tit is amazing, because you scream when you don't have it and you have it in your mouth, and then you put it away when you don't want it anymore, and you can scream again, it comes back. It magically returns and gives you the fucking milk whenever you want it. It's like an eternal source that needs nothing, which is of course the lie, because your father works hard to feed your mother so your mother's body can feed you. And when you discover that, there's a huge disappointment. Like there's disappointment that the wine bottle didn't just stand there on your table. A friend of yours was fooled by you into buying the wine bottle for you, because the wine bottle comes from a fucking vineyard. Nothing comes out of nothing. And this is what addicts hate.
I understand, Alexander. I understand all of this. I'm just thinking about like how is it related to the infinite now? Because
it's related
for me,
because the infinite now, Mamilla, when I turn away the Mamilla as a baby and says, I don't need more milk, then I've learned to say no and step down, because I know I can return to the infinite now. What the addict can't do is he can't stop drinking.
No, but like in phenomenologically, like my experience with the addiction, or procrastination, or all kind of things that belong to the same category, are like very, very different from the infinite now as an experience. I don't see the relationship between them.
This is when you deal with addiction itself. So you deal with what you're addicted to. In itself, addiction is mortido without libido. That's why eventually addicts go towards suicide. And the only problem they have with suicide is not that they don't want to commit the suicide, it's just an act. They have to do it.
I know.
And that's contrary to their mortitudinal
life. Yeah, they have to come out a little bit.
What do you mean? I have to get a fucking rope to hang myself? They're not going to do it for you. But that's a fucking active act. Yeah. Sorry, but at the end of the day, if you're not libidinal enough to go and get the rope, then you're not going to kill yourself.
Yeah.
So mortido is... So the problem is that having low self-esteem, being depressive, whatever, is a mortitudinal state, which is also very similar to addiction. So procrastination, I wouldn't call addiction in that sense. I would just call procrastination a mortitudinal state where libido is lacking. Yeah. And then working with, can you get the fucking libido started? Can you get it going? How do you do that? Well, then you go back to traumas or whatever previously in somebody's life where there's low self-esteem and the lack of self-confidence originates. That's different from working with addiction for me. But they're related. They're related.
Okay.
They're often connected. You often sit with the person that suffer from both. True.
Okay.
But here's the trick. You never get to the infinite now when you start drinking if you're an alcoholic. So I go all the way through in psychoanalysis. I sit down finally with the patient or the analyst. They promise themselves never ever to drink again. And then they sit with me and I said, there's just one last thing we need to do before you're finished with your session. What? Then I go and get a beautiful French bottle of wine. you know, totally expensive, superb wine, highest class, perfect temperature. And I put a glass in front of myself, and I put a glass in front of the adolescent, and then I pour water into the adolescent's glass, and then I pour wine into my glass, and then I say, cheers. If they can't handle that, they haven't been transformed. That's a perfect act of transformation. It's accepting that somebody else is going to have something in their lives they will never have again. That's life. That's transformation.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I know. I mean, it takes spiritual transformation to get out of these
Yeah.
deep addictions. Yeah, which is
Yeah.
one of the roles of the shamans.
Yeah.
Like the guy who founded AA. Yeah.
Absolutely. And the shaman is the one who tells you, listen, I was born to handle all this shit. I was born to throw 50,000 things into my body and get them out the other way. And I can handle it. I'm not addicted to it because I'm a fucking shaman. You're not. So you found this and it was wonderful, or it was liberating. And suddenly you're addicted to and want to do it again. But you can't do it again this often because then it becomes an addiction. So you just have to accept that. You're not me. I was lucky or whatever. Or maybe I'll die sooner than you as a price to have to pay for having 50 substances into my body. Because shamans do die earlier than other people do because they take risks on a level nobody else does.
I have one last question on the phenomenology side, and then I think we'll end there.
I thought we only got started with phenomenology. We should highly recommend our friend Thomas and Marcus' book, Phenomenology, because I always tell people to read that parallel with Proust and Event, because he's not only the German translator of Bard and Sedicus, he's also an excellent philosopher on his own. And it's a perfect complement because the phenomenology we're talking about was lacking in Proust and Event. This is therefore our seventh book written in response to Tom's work. So I want to develop phenomenology deeper with you, but bring anything.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's just, I just took notes from, by the way, I will put the links in the comments for the 3 sessions you did with Andrew, because they were excellent, with the question period after that, for those who want to dig deeper. But I just took notes from those 3 conversations, and one of them was that you said that mysticism is minimalism.
Yeah.
And that was very interesting. And can you elaborate on this, what you meant there?
Well, as a philosopher, you kill people's fantasies. That's your job. That's mostly what you do. It's like Thomas Hammerich said, the great Belgian mathematician and philosopher, I would say too. Thomas Hammerich said about Proust and Event, we read it. Well, it's a very underwhelming book. And I said, that's what philosophers want their book to be. Thank you. It's like the biggest compliment you could ever give me, because the job of philosophy is to kill axioms, to kill assumptions people make, including the ones that science uses. It's not from science that you could actually see that an axiom you're using is the wrong one.
Yeah.
Even science repeats its mistakes constantly. It tries to wind itself around an axiom that it assumes, and when the axiom doesn't work, it just says, well, I didn't work out the equation properly, I'll try something else. And then it goes back to the same place over and over again without understanding that the axiom itself is wrong and another axiom needs to replace it. That's when you go to the philosophy of science. You go to philosophy, because philosophy can invent new axioms and then scientists can try them out and see if they work better.
Or angles to look at phenomena. Yeah.
Exactly. So philosophy is in this sense fundamentally underwhelming. Now, if you take this to the next level, that means that mysticism as practiced philosophy is the ultimate form of practiced philosophy, as tantric philosophy. Mysticism is that. Then that means that mysticism is going to be even more underwhelming, because mysticism kills fantasies about how the world operates.
Oh, I see.
Like the first thing people experience after done a deep psychedelic experience is that I had no idea the world could be viewed differently from my regular sober state. I had no idea the world could look totally different than what I assume in my sober state. And it's just as real. It's just a totally different world.
Even more, yeah.
This is the beginning of seeing the world through different perspectives, as Nietzsche says, or different parallaxes, as Slavoj Žižek says. So at least now you have at least one more worldview than the regular worldview, and your subjectivity will try to glue them together, and you will say that, okay, I buy the fact that the world has to be seen in different ways. And eventually you arrive at ontology and you realize that, but actually society has constructed three different types of truths. They are reducible to one another, and they must stay that way. And you cannot overcome that. So by saying that there's no point beyond narratology is a mystical statement. Mysticism says, no, won't work, can't go there, nothing will happen. We've been there, nothing came out of it. Mysticism is the ultimate laboratory. It's when you take your body and your mind into a laboratorial state and start experimenting on yourself.
Yes.
That's why sex and psychedelics are definitely intertwined with mysticism. And they must be included.
Yes.
You are a sexual human being, you must include your sexuality fully. And psychedelics or contemplative and meditative extreme states are definitely part of the package. And you must travel the world, and you must get to know other cultures, and you must go into the wilderness, and you must unfortunately also go into societies where human beings operate, because ultimately you're going to serve them. All those things you need to do. So it's going to take your entire life and several transformations to come to the point where you really become a mystic. And when you become a mystic, what I mean with minimalism, when you become a true mystic, it's that sense of there's so little here. There's so little here. It's all those projections that people have. All those of a place they never dare to go. It's all those projections. Yes. But the liberating sense of becoming a mystic is that you come to a state where there's so little here. Now, it doesn't make any sense unless you've been there. I know that. I know that nothing tantric makes any sense unless you experience the tantric, because it's fundamentally phenomenological. If you haven't experienced it, you don't get it.
Know it, yeah.
I cannot explain to somebody what it means to be in a 16-hour tantric sex orgy. And I can explain to somebody what it means like to be in a 16-hour pumping fucking 5 psychedelic full-on experience.
Yeah. Or a 4-day dance in the forest. Yeah.
I cannot even explain what it's like to smoke a joint unless people smoke a fucking joint.
Yes.
That's exactly what tantric is. So the mystical is that to have done it, to have been there, to have done it at the right time when you were prepared for it, because otherwise it makes no sense. It's usually shocking, can even be traumatizing. It is to know why you're there, which is the intention. It's to go through it all, which is the ceremony. It's to fully integrate the experience afterwards and realize here that through intention, ceremony, integration, you can never be addicted to it.
Yes, okay.
Addiction is always non-integrative.
I got it.
It's the person who wants to stay with the ceremony, refuses to come down because they're terrified of the integration. That's what addiction is.
Because integration is basically almost like a psychoanalytic process at the end to understand what's happened.
Yeah, I've been at these sort of very professional drug parties. This happened like 30 years ago, so I won't have anybody report me to the Swedish police or anything. But like 30 years ago, I went to these very professional drug parties, and there was this rule that you started partying on the Friday night, you partied through the entire weekend, took tons of drugs, you were awake, weird things started happening. But if somebody was still sitting in your living room on Monday morning, you never invited them ever again, because that was the person who couldn't come down. The person who couldn't come down would weeks later be an addict. When you learn how to come down and enjoy coming down, and you're tired of the ceremony, and it's enough, then you can learn to come down. You integrate the experience, you memorize it, you turn it into an ontology. And you become epistemological through the experience you just did. Epistemology is the part of the experience that is now you, that is transformed you, that is your new you, that you take away you to your next experience in life. But ontology is separate from you. It's what you make of the world. and therefore it subsists as you go along epistemologically and exists in the world.
Okay, it's sort of like a map that you can use.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, you use
A
maps,
map from
right?
past events, and usually past events are a very good map, to be honest about it, because probabilities come out of the past, and most of the time history repeats itself, including yourself. Your own history repeats itself. You want your tea the same way, you want your coffee the same way, and for a while at least you want to fuck the same woman, and she still want to fuck you for some strange reason. That's when you hang on to the ontology. That's when you hang on to the subsistence. But eventually your fantasy about your subsistence being there eternally breaks down, and suddenly you realize that what you thought would be yours forever is no longer yours. And then you have to drop the subsistence, and then you have to go into absistence. You have to start thinking, is there anything coming from the future towards me that I could absorb and exist with me? It's existent with me. This was lacking in Western existentialism. I always told people I hated it. Nietzsche did it well. Kierkegaard opened the box, but nothing came out of it. You read Heidegger and you read about Heidegger's existence. You read Sartre, you read about Sartre's fucking existence. And that's exactly why consciousness can never become a science, because it's unique.
It's individual.
Consciousness is not only unique, it's unique every momentum.
Yes, it's completely.
Every momentum is birth and death.
Yeah.
Intensely so.
So would you suggest to try mystical experiences for those who are not shamanic types, or should they just stay with the sutra?
The question is why?
Why?
Are you okay with other people doing these extreme state experiences? Yeah, okay, good. Then the question is why would you do them then? Because if you're not okay with me doing it, then I'm going to fight you and kill you. It's war, right? I can do it. Or I'll escape somewhere to a mountain in Tibet and do whatever I want.
Yeah.
Because shamans need freedom. They need freedom where they can't compromise on their own freedom. That's exactly what a shamanic personality is. Every shamanoid person knows I can't compromise on my freedom. I can't have a boss over me. You're shamano, right? So let's just say that I meet somebody that accepted the fact that people go to these extreme states, and then they say, well, maybe it's not for me. And I say, yeah, maybe it's not for you. So the first question is, why you? And the next question is, why now? And the third question is, why, how?
How, yeah.
Yeah. So the first question is always, why you? Why should you try to get to this state? Aren't you happy with your regular life, having a cup of coffee? What's lacking?
That's a good question. For me, it's curiosity, actually. I want to be there. I want to know.
Exactly. But you're shamanic. So
okay.
I tell people, if you don't have an urge to go, then I'm perfectly happy with that. But if people tell me, for example, in psychoanalysis, if people tell me that, oh, I don't think the psychedelic experience is for me, really, then I say that, usually people say that because it's not the time yet, but don't say that for the rest of your life and make it some kind of eternal damnation for yourself, because you're going to regret that immensely. You're going to be probably very curious about having such an experience later in your life, except not right now. Okay. Or at least your wife is going to demand it of you, because otherwise she thinks your sex life is going to be too boring. Because your sex life with her isn't going there. I mean, having a child, seeing your child being bored, the infinite now. 99% of parents report the infinite now.
Yeah.
It's just so weird and so beyond words and so transcendent, because that screaming little thing coming out that is half your genes and all that, and it's now yours, and you have full responsibility for it, and instantly could die for this to survive, right? That experience is transcendence, and it's never explained by Jacques Lacan. It's never explained by the sort of nihilistic psychoanalysts of the 20th century. They never explained it. My frustration with Jacques Lacan was that he ignored instinct in one and ignored transcendence in the other, and focused on drive and desire. Maybe that had to be done, but it's instinct, it's drive, it's desire, and it's transcendent.
Yeah, because it's so focused on the individual, right? There's nothing below, there's nothing above. You are an individual. Eh?
Lacan had to complete the merge of Hegel and Nietzsche, in the sense they had to kill Christianity. That's what Lacan does. He does it beautifully. And he doesn't say there isn't transcendence. He's just saying basically, I'm not interested. I think psychoanalysis now has to take on transcendence. We need to get Zizek and the other guys out of the way. Psychoanalysis is definitely moving towards transcendence. People I work with, like Owen Cox, Susan Gunnar, they're all in the world of psychoanalysis, and they all want to do transcendence. Where does psychoanalysis meet art? Where does psychoanalysis mean the ecstatic experience? Where does psychoanalysis meet the pure experience? Where does psychoanalysis meet the extreme states? And that's mysticism. That's exactly the name of it. When psychoanalysis leaves the sort of formal bourgeois, look at yourself as a bourgeois character and starts thinking absists and starts thinking, but what is it I've never done in my life that I should pursue? And I've never pursued because I've never been curious before. Well, and then you get a damn Balázs Kegel who says that I'm finished with the psychoanalysis. I'm going to offer to do extreme states the rest of my life. I'm going to become a mystic. The first thing the mystic says is there's no purpose to this. It has no utility. Because capitalism forced us to think that everything must have a utility. So the first thing mystic says is, no, my spirituality has no utility at all. It's just there. It's just this urge called transcendence. I'm just drawn to it. I can't stop myself. I have to do it. I'm not myself if I don't do it. That's where transcendence starts.
Yes. I would say let's wrap it up here, no?
But this is amazing, Balázs. Sorry if you got me so enthusiastic today, but that transcendence versus transformation is key. I asked for it. If you go back to look at the Andrew Sweeney sessions I did for Parallax, I said all along that the next book is both a proper philosophy of time, radically so, really thinking time properly, and at the same time it's a book of mysticism. And I'm going to specialize on phallic mysticism since I'm a man. I expect female philosophers and anthropologists to carry the female mysticism.
Which is actually, that would be amazing to have said that.
Within your own sex. It has to be done with sex. So I just said that. And actually you answered the question in this first session we did today, of course. And ironically, this is the first episode of I Scientist, which doesn't deal with science at all. It's the first properly 100% philosophical session you're doing.
Yes, I mean,
it's I Philosopher.
It's been never the objective to do just science, but yeah.
We drop science and we drop utility.
Yeah.
So we drop the sutra.
Yeah.
We go together into the tantric realm. And I promise you, the tantric realm, a lot of things can never be put to words. So they cannot be a book.
Yeah.
Ever I find in there, they can be put to words and published publicly, I will do so.
Yes, and that's why it's sort of like the shaman is a one-on-one relationship with the person who is accompanied, because there's no words there. It's just the presence of the shaman that helps.
Yeah. And one of the things I throw forward that Andrew totally subscribes, and the reason why I've been working with Andrew Sweeney and Tim Pickerel before is because Andrew Sweeney and Tim Pickerel made the entire journey from Zen Buddhism onto Varayana.
Mm-hmm.
And they both did it for the same reason. They practiced Zen like masters for years. We talk about living in Japan and those things. But Tim Pickerel and Andrew Sweeney from the intellectual deep web moved on to Varayana precisely because Varayana presents both extreme states.
Yes.
They were tired of going towards the pure experience with their Zen masters banning them from going towards the infinite now. And for me, starting in the other end with Persian philosophy and with Sufism, I came from the point of view that I said, I'm tired of exploring the infinite now. I have to go more towards the pure experience. So I went to Japan, I learned Rinzai Zen, and then I started seeing, well, the Japanese and the Persians never meet. And then Andrew and Tim sat there and had a laugh and said, hey, why do you think we picked fucking Tibet?
Okay.
I think you're on the same journey with me. I think we're on the same journey here.
Yeah, no,
I'd love to go deeper into the conversation of really going into what does it mean to going towards a pure phenomenology, because this is phenomenology. Epistemology needs to be defined. Ontology is defined. Hegel finished it. Hegel basically created an onto-epistemological loop. Where ontology and epistemology are tied together, but you still need to remember they also need to be differentiated. So ontology is what drops into the past, epistemology is what stays in the present, right? So the loop between the present and the past is the onto-epistemological loop that Hegel did. But Hegel was also interested in, but never fully explored, what would it mean to create another loop which is irreducible to the first loop, they never meet. The other loop is the loop between phenomenology and epistemology, where subjectivity arises. So what does it mean to go between selfless and self? Selfless and self. So because that is the loop between phenomenology and epistemology. I would love to do it with you. I would love to practice it with you. I would love to go into those explorations together. I think you're doing amazing work in this department, and it's definitely the next book. That's the loop that Western philosophy has ignored.
Yes, absolutely.
I think Thomas Mark is onto this too with his work of phenomenology. Will, because will is prior to subject.
Will is prior to subject.
Yeah, that's why there's no free will. There's free choice.
Yes, okay.
The will has choice. I learned from you. The will is not free. The will wills. You're not free to will anything else but what you will. So if you will go to pure experience, if you will go to the infinite now, and if you're curious like mad and there's no utility to it, you still will do it because your will force you to do it.
And it's something
bigger. Something being dragged by the fucking will. This is Nietzsche. The will is just there, and it wills what it wills, and you're the slave under your own will. And all you can do is to create a subjectivity while dealing with the consequences of your will forcing its way through the world. The libido.
Yes. Good way to stop.
So can you add anything scientific to this to save the science molecule, or should we just leave it as it is?
Maybe another podcast.
Yeah.
I think about it. I mean,
besides everybody else, Thomas Markey, Andrew Sweeney, Tim Pickerel, I'm going to tip them about as soon as you put this up, because I'd like to involve them in the further conversation.
Sure.
We can keep this conversation with you. We can also take the conversation to Parallax, because I want to go into this with Tom and Andrew and Tim and with you.
Absolutely.
I'm so fortunate to have you as four brothers that are on this journey together with me, with your sharp minds, with your open eyes, with your beautiful, funny attitudes towards it all, with its, exactly the right attitude.
Yeah, let's exchange notes on the infinite now and the pure experience.
Let's
definitely.
do so. Big love, Alice.
Thank you, Alexander. Thank you.